This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by MediaTek. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Wednesday, January 26, 2022, and I have a couple of very special guests from MediaTek here. I have James Chen and Finbar Moynihan. Hi, guys. How are you?
Hi, Miriam.
Hey, Miriam.
Yeah. So I have you on because we want to talk about a couple of very interesting topics. One of them is very future looking. The other one is kind of just around the corner. The first one that's far away is 6G. And the one that's closer to us is Wi-Fi 7. And so, obviously, we're going to dive into this right now. I just want to let the audience know that a little further in the podcast, I'm going to have Brandon Lee as a guest. I'm going to cover the news and reviews of the week as usual. But, MediaTek's been doing all the Gs and all the Wi-Fis forever now. So tell the audience a little bit more about this. My question to you is, I'm a tech savvy person. I just bought a Wi-Fi 6 or Wi-Fi 6E router. 6E added the 6 gigahertz band. That's a big deal. It's making my life better. Should I even be looking at Wi-Fi 7? And why and what are the benefits? And then with 6G, it's the same thing. Like, I'm just getting 5G now, and I haven't even seen what it can do. Its potential hasn't quite been unleashed yet. So why 6G? So these are the things we're going to address. And maybe we can start with you, James, on Wi-Fi 7, because I think that's the closest thing to us, yes?
Yes, I'd be happy to. And I think the best way to kind of look at Wi-Fi 7 at a high level in a nutshell is that it is a brand new technology that is perfect for what we call the new normal, I guess, or the hybrid model, where essentially people will need to stay at home, to either go to school or go to work, but also, obviously, go back to work as needed. And what Wi-Fi 7 does is, in addition to increasing the speed by a whole bunch, for example, 2.4x for the same number of antennas, it also offers just excellent qualities, for example, for lower latency. So when you're doing Zoom calls, it's, better, like video calls is better on the computer. It allows, the technology to work much more seamlessly in what we call crowded environments. So imagine you're in an apartment complex. Everybody has Wi-Fi sprouting up in their own, apartment. So how do you make sure nobody clobbers each other? And there's a bunch of other things that, that it brings. So it is really, I would say high level, like I said, really a technology for the times. And that's why, you should consider upgrading when it's available.
That's really awesome. Tell us a little bit more in terms of like when we can expect these products. At this point, it seems like we are still just even seeing a rollout of 6 and 6E in the market. And I know that there's going to be MWC coming up soon, and we're probably going to start seeing some products. But how do you think realistically is going to, how long it'll be before folks actually are enjoying themselves with a Wi-Fi 7 experience that's pretty consistent? Like, we see it on phones, since you guys make chips for phones. You see it on laptops. You see it on, the devices that are critical and needed.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think you can expect to see it probably around, I think the second half of 2023 and definitely go into 2024. I'm talking about products on the shelf that people can buy or get through their favorite consumer electronics products, or get through their whatever sales service provider or whatnot. So, and the reason for that is very simple. Usually when a new Wi-Fi technology comes into play, there is a certification event by an industry body known as Wi-Fi Alliance. And usually right around there or shortly thereafter, you see this blossoming of new products with that new technology coming to market. And so that's why it's that date.
Okay. Finbar, do you have anything else that, comes to mind that you think you want to add to that in terms of like timelines or features that I think people will benefit from?
Yeah, I think James covered quite a lot of it, but I think obviously it's about bringing increased speeds. I think reducing a lot of the latency, which I think is going to affect a lot of the use cases that we see going forward. And I think we'll see some of the same themes come out in the cellular standards, right? 5G is pushing a lot of the same stuff, and I know we're going to talk about 6G a little later, but I think it's as James said, the new normal, the increased use cases at home, a lot of discussion now about the metaverse and what that's going to mean for the future in terms of new use cases that will require, different speeds and different kind of levels of low latency than perhaps we've seen in the past. And, ultimately that's what these standards are driving towards, whether it's on the Wi-Fi side or on the cellular side.
So basically what you're saying is further future-proofing. We're at a stage now because of a lot of the work at home changes that have happened with the pandemic where with 6 and 6E, we're kind of catching up to a baseline that's acceptable, right?
Yeah.
And 7 is just going to bring us to a point where we have kind of that buffer to do that extra stuff that we might need to do. Like, who knows how soon we're going to get 8K video streaming, right? And of course, MediaTek's got a huge play in the TV business with your chipsets. So
exactly.
That's another area I think that matters. Even if, the metaverse obviously is a very conceptual thing at this point, it's going to take a while before it comes in. I think Wi-Fi 7 will be well established way before that.
Exactly.
So again, foundational, right?
Exactly. And I think, MediaTek, we see it both on the device side, whether it's smartphones, tablets, Chromebooks, smart TVs, etc., as you said, but also, as James was talking about, on the access point and the client side of the Wi-Fi access. And I think it's fairly well understood now that the pandemic and all of the work from home, educate from home, etc., has probably accelerated the pace of these standards on the Wi-Fi side a little bit. The adoption of the devices, the adoption of the technology is probably moving a little faster maybe than it had in past generations, right? So it's kind of that new normal that James was talking about.
So getting a little nerdier before we jump into 6G about Wi-Fi 7, would you say that Wi-Fi 7, once it's deployed in your home, is going to be pretty much equivalent and as robust as running a bunch of Cat 7 or whatever the new standard is?
Yes.
I know Cat 6
Absolutely.
is current, but cabling through your home. Is that true, James?
Yes, absolutely. That's actually one of the goals, foundational goals, to use your term. I like that word, foundational. No,
Yeah.
It's very foundational because for the first time, we have a wireless technology in your home that can replace wireline. I mean, to a lot of people probably watching your podcast, people probably don't plug in Ethernet to anything these days because there's no Ethernet jack. But it's been a long goal of Wi-Fi to, be a 10 gigabit, not just 1 gigabit Ethernet wire, but above, up to 10 gigabit, wireline replacement. So Wi-Fi 7 definitely, can do that. Of course, you have to have, the right capabilities and performance. But yes, it was designed to expressly do that. So that's why a lot of people are also very excited about it. It's transformational in that sense.
Great. So anything else you want to add about Wi-Fi 7 before we jump into 6G? Because 6G is obviously a big can of worms. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that it's like they're unruly little worms, right? Mostly I want to kind of know where MediaTek fits in the sense that I know you have a bunch of chipsets available. You're obviously going to integrate Wi-Fi 7 into the mobile processing and into the TV processing. Anything you can talk to about that, because obviously a lot of it is still early stages, but can we expect MediaTek to deliver these features?
Yeah, it's early stages, but of course, right? We're all about investing for the future. So it's not a great stretch of the imagination to see it. And we play in all these markets that, you've said, all these different types of devices, whether it's the computer or the TV or the phone or anything else in between, or Internet of Things devices. So of course, we're working on Wi-Fi 7 along with, the industry. We're not quite ready to make the announcement yet when we're going to have those products, but that will follow hopefully very, very shortly. But yes, we are working on it.
Awesome. Yeah, I expect you did, but it's nice to hear it from the horse's mouth, as it were. Let's talk about 6G a little bit. And I think that's a bit more difficult to talk about because, as I was telling you before the podcast, I think that our audience is like, I just got 5G. What are you talking about? And so to put it into context, I think that, maybe you can help put it into context, but I think also I want to kind of hear from you, assuming we are at the stage that 5G is more readily available because it's still being rolled out. Like the miracle of 5G, as I like to call it, is really C-band and the mid-band, and that's where you're getting the kind of the best of both worlds. You're getting good reception, high speeds, low latencies. At the low band, which is what most of the US is seeing today, it's really just LTE on steroids. That's what I've been calling it. So a lot of folks listening right now are aware of this, but I think some of folks are like, yeah, what does it do for me? And of course, millimeter wave is fantastic, but it's a very limited use case at this point. It's still going to remain that way. Stadiums, airports, that's all going to happen. But where do we go from there, right? So maybe you can answer that question. And why do we even want to go beyond that at this point? Part of me thinks, well, we need to plan. 10 years it takes roughly, right? But at the same time, also, why do the people listening have to worry about this? Or do they?
Great question, Miriam. And I think it's fair, right? I mean, we should ground this in a little bit of context, right? I mean, 5G still has a long runway ahead of it. Let's be very clear, right? And as you mentioned, we're just starting to see, C-band and those mid-bands rolling out in the States, which I think will make a big difference to people's experiences here. Other regions have had those kind of frequency bands rolled out for 5G for a while. And I think we see the benefit there, where markets like China are already, 85, 90% penetrated with 5G devices now. And exactly, things like release 16, release 17 on the standard to 5G are going to continue to bring in, new features, right? More carrier aggregation, more aggregation of different frequency bands and different frequency types. Improvements to latency, reduction, etc. So those things are still going to continue to happen on the 5G world. But as you said, MediaTek has just issued a white paper on our vision for 6G. Mm-hmm. And, as, a technology leader in these connectivity technologies, like we're going to be on the forefront of, hopefully shaping what happens with this going forward. But we're looking at sort of the next year or two is going to be where the kind of high level direction for 6G gets laid out. 26, 27 is probably when we start to see the first specs coming out of the standardization work, right? We probably are not going to see, commercial networks until 29, 30. So we're still a long way away, right? And for sure 6G is going to build on a lot of that foundation seems to be the word we're using today, of what 5G is promising and delivering. Right. So both in terms of the use cases and the technologies and the network architectures that will be needed to build from.
What do you think realistically are the goals? I mean, the goals for 5G were very clear. More phones on less less physically sized spectrum, like more calls going through, more data going through, more people in one cell tower, less latency and better data speeds up, particularly up. We're starting to see all that. Where do we go from here? Like, what else do we need? Do we just crank the dial to 11 on all three of those? Or are we starting to see some crazy new stuff? Like millimeter wave obviously came out of 5G, or the other way around. 5G came out of millimeter wave. Millimeter wave has been around for a while in other areas. And new radio NR. I mean, what are they going to call it next? Newer radio?
I don't know. I'll leave that to bigger minds than mine, maybe. But I think, yes, it's all of the above, right? I mean, so, some of the vision that we've laid out and others in the industry are talking about are, increasing the speeds by, 2 to 3 orders of magnitude. So we're talking about 10x to 100x. So, potentially seeing speeds up to like a terabit per second. Right. Wow. Now that only comes possible with big, wide areas of new spectrum, which are going to be in much higher frequency bands. So not just millimeter wave, but we're now starting to talk about like sub terahertz. So we're talking about 100 to 300 megahertz or gigahertz, frequency bands being used for this, right? So all of the challenges that the industry is continuing to work through in terms of the deployment of millimeter wave are going to be there in 6G and are going to be even more challenging for the industry in 6G because the frequencies are going to be higher and the propagations are going to be more challenging. And therefore, we think it's going to take, very innovative and new approaches to the network architecture to allow the 6G promise to be delivered. So that's gonna take some work.
James, a question for you real quick related to this. And it is also Wi-Fi 7 related in a way. I mean, we are still waiting for the magic bullet in a way to give us, to come out for 5G, in the sense that like Uber and all that mobile stuff came out of 4G, right? And we're still waiting for the thing that really makes 5G shine. And, there are some applications that are starting to emerge. Obviously, metaverse is a big word right now in the industry. I think it's silly, but I don't think the technology is silly. I think the wording is silly. But I think that, clearly that could be a big key thing for the later parts of 5G and the early parts of 6G by that time. But do you imagine anything, James, that really like, in your mind would be like, this is why we need 6G? And I can't personally, other than maybe huge data sets needing to be accessed in real time between, maybe vehicles, like autonomous vehicles talking to each other all the time, something like that.
Well, I think you bring up a good point, because, we're going to approach a point, maybe already at that point, where the amount of bandwidth and information we present can only be so much to be processed by a human.
Right.
And now as speed scale, we can either go in two directions. One is go to non-humans, so like automotive or machines. That's one direction. And the other direction for increasing the bandwidth would be the number of machines or stuff that need to be interconnected all at the same time that need real-time information. Right. So this ability for, some years back ago, I was reading there's this concept called singularity, where the compute power at some point advances so much by technology that there's a point where it exceeds that of, humans. I think, with bandwidth, regardless if it's, 5G, 6G, Wi-Fi 7, or even Wi-Fi 8 down the road, we're going to approach a point where I think it's necessary for networks and machines to be all-knowing and omnipresent. Right. And we can't do that right now with 5G or Wi-Fi 6 or Wi-Fi 7. And perhaps that's where we are going. Now, I hate to, go all future and science fiction-y on everybody, but there is a point where the, average human being can only consume so much data. So you have to look beyond that physical limitation. And sure, there's things in security and healthcare, or maybe whatever that maybe government uses, that you need a lot of compute and bandwidth just to keep us safe and keep us aware, because human beings can't do it. It's the network equivalent of AI or machine learning for CPUs. Yeah,
absolutely. That's kind of why I brought up.
Way to think about it.
I brought up autonomous cars, because the amount of data they generate right now to get, to talk to one another and say, hey, I'm here and this is what's going on. I'm seeing from around the corner, letting you know what I'm seeing, way down the freeway ahead of time, kind of thing. Right. You need super low latency and huge data sets. Absolutely. And so, I think, look, this is kind of exciting, and it's exciting that MediaTek is right there, right? Exactly. As usual, kind of pushing the envelope and trying this new.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you, James and Finbar, for being my guests yet again on the show one more time. Thanks again.
Thanks, Miriam.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Miriam.
So now I've got Brendan here with us. Hi, Brendan. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Folks, you all know Brendan from This Is Tech Today. Brendan, what do you think of this MediaTek stuff? Wi-Fi 7, 6G? Are we thinking about 6G already? Jeez.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. I don't really know what to expect from Wi-Fi, to be honest with you, and how much of a difference it's going to bring in a practical sense right now, to be honest. I haven't really utilized 6E too much, so I guess we'll have to find out once we get there, but I'm really, really excited about the Dimensity 9000.
Yeah, I want to see what that chip brings to the table. Absolutely. We've got a bunch of rumors again this week. It's all pre-MWC stuff. Are you going to Barcelona, by the way?
Unfortunately, I'm not. I'm still kind of keeping it chill for now.
Yeah, I've managed to make it happen this year, so I'm definitely heading out there. But we're going to talk about some of those phone rumors, folks. But we also want to talk audio, because me and Brandon are big audio pros. At least in my past. And you just recently reviewed our did a comparison. I mean, you basically shared your very candid thoughts on the Galaxy Buds 2. So do you want to walk us through this real quick? Like first of all, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Buds, but also kind of generally, like, where do you think the state of the audio is for mobile? Because I have thoughts.
Yeah. Well, for those of you who haven't watched the video, it's an interesting video where I use a binaural microphone. So it has like fake ears and everything. Well, it's like super weird looking, but it's high quality. It's a $2,000 microphone. And instead of using it for ASMR like some weird Twitch streamer, I use it for audio samples and recordings. And so it gives an opportunity for you to kind of hear what it would sound like. It's not going to be a perfect translation, but it gives you the option to have comparative differences. So what I end up doing is I put headphones or earbuds onto that binaural mic, and I have sample recordings of all of it, which is really cool because you can actually, like, instead of just having some person tell you some ambiguous words or whatever, you can actually hear the difference. And so what's really crazy is that amongst all of the different Samsung Galaxy Buds, the ones that sound really good are the Galaxy Buds Pro, and all the others sound really inferior in comparison to them. And surprisingly, the Galaxy Buds Plus sound better than the Galaxy Buds 2.
It's interesting. Do you think a lot of that has to do with fit? Because I feel that's my biggest challenge with earbuds is fit, right? I mean, I use EMs, right? In-ear monitors that are custom fitted. I have Edimotics. Those are my wired, reference things that I use if I really want the best sound quality, the most neutral. It's not the best, in my opinion. I would love a little more bass, but I have the ER4Ss and the newer ones because there's generations of them. I've had multiple pairs over the years. I started in the early 90s with the Edimotics, like when they were just fresh, and it was a revelation back then. This is before Shure made IMs and everybody else jumped the bandwagon. So that's kind of my go-to sound. In terms of headphones, my go-to sound, I'm wearing Beyer Dynamic GT990 Pros right now,
Nice.
And that's kind of like that HD600. Those are kind of like my preferred sound signature. So I struggle with a lot of modern audio because I feel that by default it's too bass heavy typically. Now I do like a little bit of bass boost for not critical listening, but for like listening on the go, because a lot of, ambience, even with noise canceling, you pick up a lot of crap. But in my opinion, I've got all the buds and I kind of feel like, I don't know, the Plus is very good. I think that the Pros are good too. The twos, yeah, you're right. They're not super great. I overall feel that I can't listen to them without tweaking the settings. And I don't mean by tweaking the settings separately. Like, I'm not a believer in tweaking the audio on my phone with a separate EQ on my phone. I'm a believer in having some way to tweak the EQ in firmware inside the Bluetooth earbud.
Oh, wow.
Right. So what I'm saying to you is, take, for example, Sony's earbuds and headphones, right? Like the WH-1000XM4s, which are the headphones, and the
I'm impressed that you remembered that, by the way.
Yeah, I'm an audio nerd. The WF-1000XM4s, which are the earbuds. I have both, and you can apply in Sony's app a custom EQ curve that suits your needs, and it stays with the earbud, or the headphone. So you tune it, it tells the DSP in there, this is your setting, remember it, and then anything you pair from then on, it doesn't matter if you pair your computer, audio player, a phone, it just stays with your sound signature. You don't ever have to worry about tweaking the EQ on the phone or the app on the phone. And that's kind of what I like. So the Samsungs let you do that, but they don't have actual fine tuning. They have like these presets, right?
Right.
And did you see the presets called Clarity? There's one called Clarity.
Yeah, there's 6 different presets.
Every Galaxy Bud is the only way for me to be palatable is with Clarity turned on. Now, it still doesn't meet my perfect preference, but have you found anything about this in your research? Did you find, what do you prefer in terms of sound signature, and what did you prefer on the buds, all the buds?
Yeah, it's interesting because audio is really coming down to preference and then your use case. So if I'm doing something as an audio engineer, I want to have a neutral sound, which is not very exciting. But that means that it translates everywhere, you hear everything evenly. But in terms of actual use for casual listening, yeah, I do prefer a little bit more of the bass, but not to the level that you hear most things. there is that over emphasis on bass, and then like scooping out the mids, and then not even having a lot of high end, or if they do have high end, it's just this shrill, like tinny or crunchy high end that I hate. So
I hate it too.
yeah, so I like having mid range there because you know what's there? It's your piano, it's your guitar, it's
voice.
like your voice, yeah, the presence that's all there. And so when you have this scooped out sound, it may sound clean and have this nice sound, but it's actually just, you know, it's not great. So you're missing a lot of information there, and having a nice, beautiful sound stage where you hear the shimmering reverbs and the cymbals and everything else, where you feel like you're immersed in it.
Cymbals is how
Yeah.
I test it all. Like I have a few tracks I play that are FLAC, and I just listen to the cymbals, and I'm like, yep or nope. And then sometimes I tune it, right, in EQ in earbud with their presets or whatever setting they have, if they have one. A lot of
Yeah.
earbuds don't even have that option. And then they get thrown out for me immediately because I can't, if I can't tune them in DSP in firmware, there's no point because I don't want to have to adjust every device I'm using. and then if I tune them and even if the overall presentation sounds right to me, but then the cymbals aren't clean, I throw it out because I just like I don't know, I'm super sensitive to it, which is why I'm also super sensitive to lossless codecs because a lot of them just mangle the high end.
What's interesting is that there are a lot of earbuds out there, and the reality is they're not using the greatest drivers or speakers,
Right.
in a simpler term. And so when you adjust the EQ on it, it falls apart. And I think that's really telling. So they're really selling you really cheap, you know, cruddy speakers that just happen to have enough of a tuning to make you think it sounds good, but it's not. And people just don't have the trained ear for that, which is the sad part. It's like, audio is a really hard thing to get the best experience or to pitch people to go for the higher end, because it's not like a TV. When you look at a TV and it's like, oh, that's 4K or that's HDR, it's like so obvious you can just see it. But with audio, you really have to train your ear and hear the nuances and almost hear things side by side in order to notice it. And so, you know, most of the earbuds out there right now, I just do not like, and they fall apart. I do prefer using a graphic equalizer to do manual adjustment. So like I've reviewed the Razer Hammerhead Pros, and on their own, on a base level, even though they have THX tuning, and I, you know, I love the people at THX and Razer, but I didn't like the tuning. But thankfully they had a graphic EQ option within the app. And when I adjusted that, I was like, oh my gosh, I actually love these way more than the AirPods Pro and all these other different ones. They're one of my favorite ones because of my custom settings.
Yeah, no, that makes a big difference too. So I'm a big Sony person for my wireless needs, primarily the headphones, the WH-1000 XM4s, because I fly a lot. And I find them to be incredibly good at noise canceling, obviously, but without coloring the sound too much. And the fact that I can EQ in DSP in firmware and get exactly what I want out of them. By default, out of the box, they're a little too bass heavy for me. Yeah. But I tweak that out, and they actually nice because they have like a kind of a loudness slider, you know, the magical weird loudness settings, and so that lets me actually adjust it without changing too much the main EQ. And I've got as you said, I've got a go-to setting that just works for me. But I've tried some earbuds that I've tried adjusting this settings, and there are some settings in there. For example, the OnePlus buds, and I mean there are various OnePlus buds, but it's interesting to me. That's when I find the limitations. Like I tweak it to what I want, and it still sounds, overall the presentation is right. Like the frequency response is flatter, but they fall apart in the high end or the low end or the mid range. Somewhere something just doesn't work because as you said, the drivers are so cheap that the firmware is already compensating for that weakness. And by trying to fix that, I just kind of make them do something they can't do, right?
Yeah.
And so I would love to hear what you thought of the Buds 2 and the Buds, all the Samsung Buds in general's presentation in terms of these EQ settings. Did you find one that you liked that kind of seemed to work most of the time so you didn't have to touch a complicated graphic EQ?
Yeah, what's interesting is, they only have the 6 different presets amongst all the buds. And as a whole, I don't like all of them, and I don't like having that control. And if there was one that I actually like the most, it's only on the Galaxy Buds Pro, and it's surprisingly just the normal setting.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, because it does have like a solid low end to it and a nice shimmering high end without losing tons of the mid range. When I went with like clean or any of the other settings, I found that it started to fall apart a little bit in different areas that it was excelling at before. So that's really surprising for me. But as a whole, like I would like to have a little bit of an adjustment there on them. But Samsung doesn't let you do that. You can get third-party options for the app and stuff, but that requires a little bit more knowledge on how to EQ things.
Yeah, it's hard to play with the graphic EQ. Even I've been doing audio for 30 years, and you have to stop. It's like you have to stop at some point and go and take a break and go back and go like, how bad did I mess this up?
Yeah,
right? And you go like, oh my God, I'm so far off, because it's so easy to kind of like, psychoacoustics, the way we hear sound is it's tunable, it's adaptable. So if you're playing with a sound signature, your brain gives you this false positive that you've got the right thing, and then you go back to it and you're like, nope. And it's also why it's really important to isolate noise and any kind of surrounding interference for like just even a fan in the background. It just, your brain will adapt, and then you'll get an EQ setting that's just not right.
Yeah.
So, that's my experience. But
real quick, I think that part is the coolest part, like, and most frustrating part about being an audio engineer. So, like, because your body is adapting and compensating for things. So that's why I like having this microphone. It's really so shocking. It's surprising for me because when I'm recording all of them, I'm like, but that's not how I perceived it when I put it in my ear. Like, so how does it actually sound that way? But like, I'm still putting it in the same way for every single one. I'm making sure there's a good seal on every single one, and the microphone's just going to be a microphone. It's just going to record it in the most sterile, scientific, whatever it actually is way, and your brain is not compensating for it. So when you get these comparative differences, you're just like, well, that's actually what I'm getting. Holy cow.
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting though, but fit, I think, is a real thing. Like the size of your ear canal, the way it's shaped, all of that is unfortunately never taken into account by the standard binaural set, because the ears are standardized. Right. And I feel that unless you have custom molds, which I'm not expecting to be able to have. So for all these earbuds, actually not all of them, because some of the Samsung ones we're talking about, the pluses, right? And maybe the original don't have silicone tips, right? I think
it's the lives that don't have tips.
The lives, thank you. Yeah, I hate the lives. They just don't sound right to me.
No.
It's funny because you're right. The Plus, the Pros, and the 2s are my favorite out of the box. And to get them quite kind of close to where I want, I turn on the clean or clarity or whatever setting. But the regular, the base original ones and the live ones didn't work for me. But it's interesting. Here's an interesting one. I had the original OnePlus buds, not noise canceling, no silicone tips. They're like
AirPods,
like the original AirPods, right?
Yeah.
And I love their sound out of the box. To me, they're almost perfect.
Wow.
But a lot of other people hate them. And I think it's due to fit. I don't even push them in any way in my canal. I just let them rest on my conch, and they're perfect to me. Like, they sound some of the best earbuds I've heard out of the box.
Yeah.
It's uncanny. And everyone else disagrees with me. And I think part of them,
fit, yeah.
I think a fit thing, but part of it is also they disagree because they're like bass heavy, and it's not bass heavy that way. Right. But I have not, the other 3 earbuds they made the Buds Z, and then the Buds Pro, and then the Buds Z2. And I don't like any of them. Like, I just don't, they're not good enough. They don't pass muster because they don't, first of all, they don't have in firmware EQ of any kind that I can tweak. And secondly, they're just way too bass heavy. And I think, honestly, the Pros are the worst. Like, it's funny how sometimes buying the cheapest one, I tell you, the best one I have right now are the Realme Buds Air 2. I'm looking at the box back behind me. The Realme Buds Air 2 are $39.
Whoa.
They have silicone tips. They have active noise canceling. And I don't have to do any EQ. Out of the box, they sound fantastic. Now, they're not gonna blow your mind. They're not even remotely as good as, like the Sonys or even some of the Apple stuff or like, never mind my Ademotics or whatever. But they present in a consistent, nice and flat way, and they're nice and pleasant and comfortable, and they do decent noise canceling, and they're cheaper than even the cheapest OnePlus buds you can buy. And it's the same company. It's Realme, it's BBK Group, and they have an EQ setting in firmware if you want to turn it on. So I'm like, how is it that the same company, it uses the same app, Hey Melody, right? Like, unless you have a OnePlus phone, then it's automatic. But it's incredible to me that the same company produces completely radically different earbuds for different price points, for different sound signatures even.
Yeah.
Like, have you noticed that?
It
Like
is really
Anchor
bizarre.
does that too with their different brands, you know?
I have a lot to say about Soundcore, but like,
Oh God, no, I don't like them generally.
yeah. But yeah, what's interesting is we've been talking about a lot of different earbuds that have active noise canceling or ANC, and I have a lot of thoughts about that because, you have your top tier, which is honestly like the Galaxy, this Apple AirPods Pro, your Bose Quiet Comfort, and your Sony's, your XM4s. I can't remember all of them.
Yep, you got it.
That sounds like an anechoic chamber where you feel like there's no reflections or anything going on, and that can be a very disorienting thing. But that's like 100%. High quality. And then you have some that are like, okay, yeah, like this is definitely reducing a lot of the room tone, like the hums and the ambient like sounds and stuff like that, and that's good. But it's not amazing. And then you have some that it feels like it was just like a bullet point on a spec sheet. I'm like, I don't know why this is here. I sound like I'm in a tunnel. It's not doing anything. And I find like most of the earbuds are actually like that. And so I don't think active noise canceling on its own is something that people should be able to just take at face value. They really have to research that to find out if it's actually useful.
Yeah, I think that really is to me, that's more of a matter of personal preference. I can live with complete isolation because I've worn IMs for years and because I've worked in recording studios that are super quiet. But I feel you. I think for some people having some minimal amount of, it's interesting. I don't know how familiar you're with dithering and the whole concept of adding noise to a signal to make it sound better in some way. For example, back in the days when we used to have DACs that were only 14 bits or ADCs, and you wanted to get 16-bit out of them, you'd use dithering. You'd add a little bit of noise so that the lowest significant bit wouldn't sound so crunchy, right? So the low levels audio would sound, there was a very small layer of background noise there, but it would sound really natural because the ADC always had to convert something and you didn't have that weird, lower significant bit BS going on. It's so fascinating to me how some of us naturally love it more with some tiny little bit of something in the background. And so I actually would love to see in firmware them introduce a feature that, instead of transparency mode, an adjustable transparency mode where you can set it very low, like I want 1%, 2%, 5% of background audio mixed in just to give me that more natural feel, if that's how you feel about it, or even synthesize some white noise in the background very, 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 very faintly in the DSP before the conversion to analog in the DAC inside the buds. I mean, all of that, but we're nerding out so hard right now. This is kind of what if we had you and I should create our own brand of earbuds. That's basically what happens, Brandon. We're going to go to China, Shenzhen, and get somebody to manufacture the brand, there you go, the branded buds for us. But I'm still excited that if I look at, 20, 30 years ago when I was getting started and the choices people have at the prices people have, and the fact that wireless, it's still not perfect, but it doesn't suck anymore. It used to be so bad. In the early days of SBC, literally you would hear the music slow down and speed up because the clock rate could be consistent depending on the Bluetooth connection. Around 2000, I want to say 7, 6, the early Nokia wireless earbuds, they weren't earbuds back then. They were, neck buds or mostly headphones. Yeah. And you could literally, your music, the sample rate would slow down. And you're like, no, and now here we are. We have aptX HD. We have LDAC. LDAC's my favorite right now, codec, in terms of, being lossy but high quality. And Sony uses it a lot, but it's fascinating to me. And I feel that even with these Samsung buds, you get something pretty great, especially with, as you said, the pluses, the pros, and the twos. Although I think the pluses and the pros are my favorite out of all of them. The twos are not too bad, but they're not quite it's a step down from the pros. Yeah,
it has waterproof issues too. It's only I think it was an IPX2 or something. It's
they're cheaping out on us. Yeah. I mean, seriously, Samsung. Oh man.
Have you heard of the WiSA standard for audio?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a little bit. It's not what you get on an earbud. We're going a little bit deep. Like this is for like surround sound systems and stuff like that, and it allows you to have wireless audio in a lossless format. And what's so fascinating about all of it is that it's essentially kind of creating like a Wi-Fi network, and it's just connecting to all of these different speakers. And, so the only wire you need is the power cable, or if it has battery built into it, but, a power cable, I'll do that over running long audio cables across my room.
Yeah.
And you can just keep adding on more and more speakers and having that high quality, connection and bandwidth for lossless audio with low latency is astounding. And so that's the newest thing that's happening in home theater, and hopefully it comes somewhere else, because I've had a tremendous experience with it.
I actually don't have much experience with it, but I think the idea is really sound, and I love how the audio industry is just kind of continuing this march. Like, there was a time when I felt very jaded about it. I was like, yeah, we've reached kind of like the pinnacle. FLAC, you can do 96/24, like whatever. Do you need anything more than that? Then I discovered DSD, right? Digital, the 1-bit digital streams that Sony came up with for SACD, and that blew my mind. And I still think today, if I have the choice of listening to the best digital experience I can possibly, it's going to be an SACD of some kind, like a 2-channel SACD. I'm not a multi-channel person, but that's not going to happen. I mean, nowadays you don't do that. You listen to a DSD stream that you purchased or whatever from Tidal or something. I don't know if Tidal supports DSD. I think it's I want to say they're probably using PCM. But anyway, the point is, it's just fascinating to me that we just keep piling stuff on. It's like imagine like you felt like you've reached perfection 5 times over, and it just keeps getting better and sweeter. And at a price point that keeps coming down, in an portability that keeps going up. Like these wireless earbuds we have today that are, true wireless, completely independent left and right. There used to be sync issues and stuff. That's still there somewhat, but it's so much better than you have. And like for imaging and soundstage, and that the crispy cymbals we're talking about, since it's generally we're listening to a stereo stream coming in, that's one of the reasons they sound smeary, is like if you can't time the left and right ear properly, you're screwed. Like it just microseconds are going to change the sound quality and the texture and the timbre of the sound.
Yeah, you run into phase issues and everything.
Oh my God, phase is like the
the
both
audio
the worst and
engineer's
the best
bane of existence.
of any kind of audio.
Yeah. I'm so fascinated though that like how different audio engineers are, because you're on a more like technical, like dithering and all these different things, and I come from a live sound band musician background, so the idea of a graphic EQ, like you're just like, I don't want to go there. For me, I'm just like, this is my playground. Like
well, you have to, right? I mean, you're in a sound space, you have to adjust it.
Yeah,
I totally get
mixing
that.
for a cruddy room.
Yeah, no. I think it's interesting. So to me, that we're getting so much good choices, and no matter what your taste in music is, it's getting better. What I want to see is better fit compensation in some way. I want it to be so that, there's some earbuds and some headphones that do kind of a pinging. They ping your ear canal and kind of get basically a transfer function out of it, right? Like if you send an impulse to anything and you record that impulse back, you can get a kind of a curve of how the space responds. The space could be as small as your ear canal and as big as a big concert hall. And it gives you at least a starting point for EQing things. I kind of wish some earbuds do that. Like the OnePlus have that sound tuning feature, the Pro ones.
Yeah, the new AirPods have that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's absolutely shockingly good. I remember getting them and I was expecting to just poo-poo all over it. I'm like, oh, okay, these stupid things, they don't even go in my ears. And then I put them in, I'm like, okay, these are actually really great. I'm like, what in the world is going on? And then I would actually shift it in my ear.
Yeah.
I would shift it in my ear and I would hear the sound change. I was like, okay.
Yeah, they do it dynamically, which is the only ones who do it dynamically, which I think is really impressive. Most of them do it statically, and the OnePlus feature isn't very good, to be honest with you. It's a one-time thing, and I mean, you can redo it as many times as you want, but I found that it doesn't match my reality very well. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. It's fascinating to me how we are still pushing forward. What are your favorites right now? What are your favorite earbuds and headphones, since we've talked about basically Samsung a lot?
Yeah, I mean, I've been using the Beyerdynamics DT900 Pro X's and the 700 Pro X's, depending on what, context I'm in. I prefer the 900Xs for just listening to things because they're open back, and so they get a wider sound stage.
Yeah, same with these.
Yeah, but when I was recording the Galaxy Bud video, I had the 700 Pros because they have closed back ones, and
Absolutely.
if anyone who is familiar with biodynamic headphones and recording studios, that the DT was it 770 Pros. And like the DT 700 Pro X's, which I think they're kind of trying to use as the replacement. Those are kind of like an industry standard. They're everywhere. They're great tracking headphones and everything. So that's what I use. I actually haven't gotten into a lot of like the professional in-ear monitors too much because when I was first starting out as an audio engineer, I had no money whatsoever.
No, it's expensive. Yeah, for sure.
And I would see these. I'm like, oh, I wish I could buy them, but I can't. But I recently picked up some just for fun. It's the Crinicals, the Dusk Plus or whatever. Yeah, he has his own earbuds that are available, and those are fairly neutral, but they're not for people who have small ear canals. Apparently, I found out that I have really, really big ear canals because I can wear the Galaxy Buds Pro like nobody. It's totally comfortable, and I hear all these people in my Discord server saying like, I can't fit them in my ear, like they're just too big. I'm like, wait, what? Like,
why? Yeah, no, that's real. I know people with really small ear canals. I'm on the medium to large side, depending on which buds I buy and use. I guess on the slightly bigger side. Yeah. So I mean, that's kind of what I've been using for like gaming. Or like Bluetooth gaming or whatever. I do like the THX Panda Drops. Headphones. Panda Drops are pretty damn great.
Yeah, they have a nice mid range to all of it. But I'm primarily just using the Biodynamics right now for headphones. Yeah, I'd like to go higher and maybe get a Focal. But those are my friend, 100%. My friend who mixes for like Wolfpack and Scary Pockets and all these other different. Awesome bands.
Folks that work Scary Pockets and Wolfpacks. Nice.
Yeah. Great. My friend Caleb Parker, if you want to check him out, he mixes all of the Scary Pockets songs. So
nice.
Yeah, it's awesome. And so he has a pair of Focal headphones that he uses for spot mixing on the go because obviously he's going to use like real studio monitors. But like he let me use those, and I had an experience. I was like, I don't know what's going on right now, but I hear a lot of things I didn't know was there.
Oh yeah. For sure. Like I feel like the reason I'm using my Bears is because they're bulletproof, right?
Yeah.
They are something it's a reference for me. I know them well. I know what I'm going to get out of them, and I can mix with them. I can work with them, or I can play with them. I can listen. I can enjoy. They're not offensive. They're cheap too, because I've gone through so many, even though they're pretty rugged, the Pros, I've destroyed a number of them.
Well, and they're so comfortable. Like it feels like clouds are on your ears.
Even right now, I need new pads because they're really dirty because you sweat and they get nasty. And I do a podcast every week and I wear these to work with. Like if my room is quiet, I don't do anything with active noise canceling. Mm-hmm. I just wear these. If my room is loud, like I live next to a bar, so sometimes it gets a little crazy or the neighbors are a lot out of control. I just put my Sonys on and I use wired if I need to edit because
sync.
It's not so much precision on my Macs, they're pretty good. It's more there's always a click sound when the Bluetooth gets turned on and off, like for power saving. So, you're editing and you're not playing music, so it shuts down. And then you hit the space bar and the first thing you hear, is that taking my recording? Is that taking Bluetooth?
Yeah, that drives me nuts.
So I use wired on the Sonys, and then I use wireless if I'm just listening to an entire album or a playlist or something, and I'm writing a review or something. But I try to avoid noise canceling because again, it colors the sound even if it's really good. And so that's my go-to. My IMs are really, in the old days when I used to fly and there was no good active noise canceling, I used to use the Automotics with my custom ear molds. But here's the thing. Your ears, as you get older, change in shape. They're getting bigger for me very slightly. So I actually need to get them refitted. They're a little loose. They're still good. I can get a seal still, but they're a little loose. And because they're 20 years old, my molds, believe it or not, those things last forever. So I need to redo them. But it's interesting to me how, we have so much choice. And if I, I'd love some focals or, even higher end than that if I could. Like, Bayer makes some really nice cans that are really expensive. Sennheisers makes some really nice cans. I don't have a pair of HD 600s. I've always used them and borrowed them and enjoyed them a lot. I'd loved, like Mastrop had a pair, like a clone, and I was thinking of just buying them just to have them around because they're such a reference. I don't think I'd use them day to day. I'd still use my Bears because they're so much more bulletproof. Like I literally drop these things from ear height onto my floor sometimes, and because they're all metal, other than there's a few plastic pieces. Generally, what breaks for me is cords, and unfortunately, unlike Sennheiser, they're not easy to replace the cords on the Bears. And then what also breaks is I just end up with one of the drivers starting to have rattles because there's hair in there or whatever. Mm-hmm. And you can take them apart a lot, and I can sometimes tweezer the hairs out, but you get to a point where it's a lost cause. You listen to heavy bass and you can hear that one of the drivers is distorting, and there's just nothing you can do. They're perfectly usable still, but not for the kind of work you and I do. Yeah. So I just throw. It's interesting though. I just keep them for spare parts, but I get another pair because that's a wonderful thing about it. You can buy these for less than $200 on. These are less than $200 on Amazon. So whatever.
And the thing that they changed with the new models, the Pro X's, is they've kind of done this a little bit before, but they've really pushed into it for this generation. Is they've made each and every single part replaceable, and that's something that I love, and I wish would be we could find across the industry. Is like, hey, if something breaks or I need to replace something, can I actually do that, or do I have to throw away the whole thing and buy a new one? Because that costs a lot of money to do that, and it's really bad for the environment. So the fact that 100%. Biodynamic is going in that direction, I just love.
It's great. So hey, let's jump into some news. Want to do that? There's a bunch of stuff, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on some of it. Some of it, I'm sure you have some opinions. Some of it, I'm just going to quickly go through to let the audience know that it exists. Let's start with the stuff that's maybe not as exciting. So the officially this week, we basically got a bunch of new phones, but they're not, US bound phones. So there's the Redmi Note series, which is every year Xiaomi comes out with a Redmi Note, and it's kind of mind blowing how good the specs are for the money. And this is another, set of those. So we're getting the Redmi Note 11 series this year. There's 4 phones, and the pricing, again, there's no US pricing on these, but they vary between like say $200 and $280 or so, 300 maybe at most. There are some, one of them, the Note 11 Pro 5G, is a 5G phone, but interestingly using a chip we know exists, but we haven't seen yet. It's the Snapdragon 695. So that's a cool little tidbit there. Then we have a 4G version with a Helio G96, which is basically one of MediaTek's top 4G chips, I believe. Wow. And then these are both 108 megapixel non-binning cameras, and they have large batteries, and they have the the 6.67 inch AMOLED 120 hertz, really nice screen. So imagine a phone for $300 that has all that. Yeah, it's pretty sweet. So that's why every year they're a very great success, usually very popular in Asia and generally in India as well. So like Philippines, other parts of the Pacific Islands and the Far East. So it's interesting to me that they're this year made 4 models. They're actually kind of diversifying. So the Note 11 is kind of the cheaper one of them all, and it has an 6.43 inch LCD at 90 hertz, but it has a Snapdragon, another chip we haven't seen yet that we know exists. It's been published, but we haven't seen a phone with it yet. It's Snapdragon 680 4G chip. And then the one I have, which I put in an unboxing video. By the way, I will put a link to your Galaxy Buds 2 video in the show notes. So folks, check that out. And check out my unboxing of the Redmi Note 11S. So the 11S is interesting because it's kind of like the smaller but more high-end model. So it's got an OLED at 6.43 inches, 90 hertz, and it's a 4G phone, so it's got that Helio G96 from MediaTek, and then it has a 108 megapixel camera instead of the 50 that you find on the base Note 11. And it's again I think the one, say the Samsung GN2 sensor, the 0.7 micron Nana bins. So it doesn't have OIS or anything, and the 11S has 33 watt charging, which I think the higher end models like the 5G that I mentioned and stuff have 65 watt charging. Of course, no wireless charging on these. You get stereo audio on them. You get micro SD support. Look, if you're not in the US and you're looking for an affordable phone and 5G doesn't matter so much to you, I always tell people that the Redmi Note series every year, just since the 9 last year, the 10, this year, the 11, I think they're going to be a reference. So check those out. Those are the phones that are the only real phones that were announced this week. The Huawei announced, that they're making international global models of the P50 Pro and P50 Pocket, but we don't know. That's not going to come to the US, and these phones were already out, so I'm not going to get into them too much. What I want to talk with you about, since we talked a lot about OnePlus Buds earlier, is the OnePlus stuff. So last week I had Jaime on the show, and we talked about how we didn't understand the whole we've been following up on OnePlus, both of us, for a long time, and you have too, right? And you've seen the oppification, we've seen it coming even before they made it official, and we've seen the execution. And, we were talking about this with Jaime, how we don't really understand the strategy, because it seems like the Oppo and OnePlus brands are becoming almost identical, and just cosmetic differences. Right. Of course, the Color OS, Oxygen OS, being mostly Color OS thing. That's all fine by me. The only thing that I don't understand this year is how they launched the OnePlus 10 Pro in China only, and so the cat's out of the bag. We're going to get that phone. The only thing that we don't know about the US model of that phone is the pricing at this point. And as Jaime and I said last week, the pricing is going to be super critical, because last year the 9 Pro was too expensive and didn't deliver enough, and the camera wasn't good enough to really wow us. So the camera, Marquez just did his video, the camera is still not good enough, I think, to wow us. So this thing better be $800 or something, and then it's going to be a hit, right? And that's exactly what Marquez said. But I agree with him, and I don't understand this strategy of launching. If you're going to make OnePlus the kind of North America Western brand of Oppo for markets, well, Europe has Oppo as well, so I'd say North American brand of Oppo, then why launch it in China first and ruin everything? And then why have all these rumors, which is what I want to get to with you, is that we now finally have rumors of a 10 and 10R, for the 10R is for India, but so we might see a 10 with a Snapdragon 8 Gen 1. And then what's got me more excited, I was joking with somebody about this recently, like, they need to make a OnePlus 10 Ultra. So what do you think? Like, what is your take on all this? First of all, do you have any kind of interpretation of their weird strategy? And then secondly, are you excited about an Ultra?
Well, yeah. First of all, I'm really confused about what they're doing as well, because they had all this good favor in the North American market. People were rooting for them, and then they just abandoned them. And so now when I talk to people about OnePlus, they're just like, "Oh yeah, I don't really care about them anymore." And I'm like, "What? Like, what did they do? They lost it. That's nuts." And I don't understand the push into the Hasselblad thing when they're not really doing like anything amazing with the camera yet. And fun fact, Hasselblad is owned by DJI. I don't know if you know about that. That's a weird thing. And so that's just so that's just a licensing play for the branding and supposedly some research and tuning and stuff like that that they say will continue for a few years. So we'll see how that materializes. But as a whole, like, I don't understand what they're doing, because now all the hype is gone. Like, at least launch it at the same time. I've seen Marquez's video. You have Color OS on there, but like what operating systems going to show up in the North American market? I don't know. It's just really confusing. So whenever it lands here, at least with the enthusiasts, which, to be honest, OnePlus is primarily with enthusiasts still, because it's still such a small, market share. Well, it's gone. It's just going to show up and be like, okay, cool. Like, I don't get it. I know,
that's how I feel too. And so how last year's OnePlus 9 the non-Pro was a big disappointment, because they removed OIS on something with a Hasselblad branding.
Right.
To me, like, I'm okay with no OIS on a cheaper phone. I get it. It's a cost thing. But to me, it totally feels like they let the carriers dictate what features this phone should have. And, I can live with a plastic frame, although it's kind of like, for that price, that was a bit cheap. Mm-hmm. But I was just like, now we're hearing rumors of a 10, and I'm like, please don't mess this up. If you're going to have the 10 Pro, what do we know of the 10 Pro? That 10 better be, competing at $600 or something, if it cuts any more corners. But then the Ultra, what could that bring to the table? Can we please get a periscope telephoto in addition to whatever you got there?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's interesting because, first of all, like, the Pro is not that much of an upgrade from the 9 Pro, to be honest. It's just more of a cosmetic difference in a change in processor. So that's confusing. So yeah, an Ultra. Okay, maybe that's the real Pro, and maybe that's the real thing that's going to come to North America. But what makes an Ultra an Ultra? Like I'm starting to get confused with some of these names because, like, you know, anyone who's been watching or listening to my content for a while knows that, you know, we've talked about the Pixel Ultra and stuff like that, the Google Pixel Ultra, and I always ask people, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of exciting that there's something that might be hidden or whatever, but like, what would a Pixel Ultra even be? So what is a OnePlus Ultra? What would that even be? Like, phones are so mature now that, like, I'm not sure what the big difference will be other than OnePlus going for what would be the flagship tier specs that you see from Samsung and you know, maybe Apple, because they're clearly not doing that with the OnePlus 10 Pro.
Yeah, no, for sure. I feel like the OnePlus 10 Pro is an equivalent essentially to the Oppo Find X5 Pro, but, you know, with slight variations. And that's basically what the OnePlus 9 Pro was, an equivalent to the Oppo Find X3 Pro last year without the microscope, obviously. And that's being dropped, it looks like, from the Find X5 Pro now. So to me, an Ultra would be to match Samsung. And speaking, by the way, of Samsung, I'm sure everybody already knows this, but the Unpacked event is now officially happening on February 9th, so stay tuned for that. But look, the S22 Ultra is coming. The S21 Ultra is with us. The S21 Ultra, you know, is a freaking amazing phone, really. I'm not a huge fan of their software, but I have to say, in terms of hardware, man, that thing just ticks every box. And the camera performance is super solid. So to me, this is kind of how I interpret a OnePlus 10 Ultra. It's like $1,000 or $1,100 or whatever, you know. By the time it's on sale,
inflation.
Inflation. The way I look at it is more, by the time it's on sale, you can get a deal from a carrier for $1,000 or $1,100 or something. Right. You know, because you know how it is with Samsung. That's the thing that Jaime was saying last week that I so agree with. It's the carrier deals and the Samsung deals and the trade-in deals are just killing the rest of the competition, you know, other than Apple. Right?
Yeah, like I was looking up my S20 Ultra that I still have for a trade-in, and they would give me, I think it was like $700 or $800 for it still.
Wow. I mean,
it's ridiculous.
Holy crap. Of course you're going to upgrade to an S22 Ultra if you can get that kind of money. For a 2-year-old phone, wow. So, you know, my point is that to me, the 10 Ultra, the OnePlus 10 Ultra would be, you know, add a 10X or whatever periscope telephoto to the existing stuff we've seen. And I mean, what else are you going to do? Like, it has everything else. It has super fast 50 watt wireless charging, 80 watt wired charging, a big battery, Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, lots of RAM, lots of storage.
Is that going to be enough? Is someone going to want to upgrade it, or are they going to want to pay $1,000 for it? And then that's kind of the problem that's happening right now, right? With smartphones.
Well, yeah, especially when Samsung's going to have a super polished S22 Ultra. Unless they screw it up somehow, it's going to be really rock solid, and it's going to come out with discounts.
That one's going to be, I mean, without the discounts. So there's some nuance here, but, like, you know, the list price is around what, $1,300. So that's quite pricey for the Ultra, and it's essentially just a Note, to be frank. But
basically.
But when you have the trade-in deals and the carrier deals and stuff like that, it does make it more manageable.
So I think that's kind of what I could see happening. But again, where's the excitement? Like, if you just add a periscope to the OnePlus 10 Pro, good. I'm not against it. But how are people going to pick that over an S22 Ultra?
Right.
Like, in the US. And since, you know, OnePlus obviously is the only BBK Group brand we sell officially here, then it's, you know, relevant. And the carriers obviously wants to get their ROI. Now, the carriers, I think, did sell the 9 Pro last year, some of them, but mostly they sold the 9, and the 9 was a dud. So I hope the 10 comes along, and the 10's, you know, just needs to be competitive. I think OnePlus could make all this happen, including a 10 Ultra in the US, if they just were priced below Samsung.
Right.
And hopefully after 3 more months, because the rumors are March, or whatever, 2 more months, because the rumors are March for the launch, that they tune the cameras even better, right? Like, there is some room for improvement there, according to Marquez, because, you know, it seems to me like it's just an equivalent to the 9 Pro with a worse ultra wide, although you get a wider ultra wide. So you get wider, but you don't get quite the same quality sensor. It's just weird. I don't understand the strategy. What I would love to see, and I said this to Jaime last week, is that I have an Oppo Find N here, the folding phone, right? And I would love to see them do a OnePlus version of that for the US. Now that, I think, could get some people excited, because the form factor, it kind of fits between the Flip and the Fold. from Samsung. And yeah, I guess we'll see.
I like that form factor way more than the Galaxy Fold. It just like it's too narrow on the Galaxy Fold.
Me too.
So that's pretty exciting. But I don't know if we're going to talk about this, but like it seems like Google is going to work on their own foldable, and supposedly it's going to have the same form factor, a shape or aspect ratio as the Oppo Find N.
Absolutely. We did touch on this last week when the rumors hit on that. I'm super excited about the foldable that Google's doing. It looks very clear that they're doing something, and maybe that's what we're going to get. Maybe we're not ever going to get this OnePlus Oppo equivalent. We're just going to get something from Google with the same display since Samsung makes it. And I'm on board. I'm actually really excited about the Pixel 6a. We got more rumors of that this week alongside of rumors of the Pixel Watch.
Yeah.
And I know you did a piece on the Pixel Watch a while back.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on all of like Google's strategy? We've discussed it on the podcast a lot here, but let's not talk about the phones that already exist, but more like maybe in context of what you think is coming and where you think Google is going. Can Google really get away with making a folding phone they're going to sell more than 10 of?
Yeah, that's the hard part is they don't sell a ton of units. But I will say that it seems like, this last round has done fairly well for them, despite supply chain issues. So, maybe they would have done a lot better if they actually had it in stock and stuff. But, there was a lot of talk about the foldable being discontinued, which is didn't make a lot of sense. It's just delayed. And, how do you know if something is actually delayed or discontinued if it was never announced? It's all these weird things that are going on. But I wouldn't be surprised if they're having their own custom tensor in there. I'm curious because the tensor is really based upon an Exynos processor. And we know that there's 100%. Been some issues with Samsung's recent one. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of the difficulties that are found from the Samsung side actually played some sort of role into whatever chip is going into this foldable. But that's just speculation on my part. Just, I don't know anything, to be honest. But, that might be it. Like, that's why the rumor, initially when it said it was discontinued, mentioned how it wouldn't be competitive. So I wonder if that's a part of it. When we look at, like, the smartwatches and stuff like that, I think we really do need Google to put out a Pixel Watch, desperately so, because...
More important to me than anything else they're doing right now. Like,
yes.
If you look at supply issues and you have to pick your battles, I think the folding phone can wait another year, but the watch needs to happen now.
Yeah, because even with the Galaxy Watch 4, like I know it has a new Wear OS and everything, and it's great, but it's still so Samsung-y. Like I don't have the Google Assistant. I don't have the health apps. It's all messy. Like I don't like it. And then on top of that, the thing that makes me really excited is Fitbit, because I'm actually wearing a Fitbit right now. I've been giving it a shot and I really enjoyed it because of the fitness, measurements and the sleep tracking is just really, really nice to have. And it's something that I don't have on the Galaxy Watch. So if you have something that's robust like that on like Fitbit integration within a Wear OS device, that's actually going to be something that's seriously competitive to an Apple Watch, because they already have that whole ecosystem. You bring in Fitbit, you already have a community, you already have like classes and everything else built in, ready to go from the start, and that's huge. So I think that's going to be like the best smartwatch for Android users by far.
I agree with you. I think that the Samsung ones are just not that pleasant, and I want that seamless integration with my Google experience and my Pixel experience. And as you said, with Fitbit, you bring all this community and well-tuned ecosystem to the play. And I think I really want to see that happen. And I do want to see a 6A because I love the A series phones. They're so sweet. And I really hope that, they can deliver something. I mean, the rumors right now is that we're going to keep the cameras from the 5A and add the Tensor chip. I'm fine with that because I feel that
it's crazy. Like I have this saying that my community knows. It has a great delight to dollar ratio.
Delight to dollar ratio. Lovely indeed. I've heard you say it. I think it's great. I think, look, I'm happy to see what Google's doing, but at the same time, I'm just like, pick your battles, Google. It's okay. Like there is still this weird supply chain stuff. Please don't skip the watch because of a stupid folding phone, right? Yeah. It's not stupid. I'm on board for a folding phone, but I just was like, oh, I want the watch so bad. I've been watching a Pixel Watch since the Nexus days.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know how many people are going to buy a foldable phone compared to a smartwatch. It's true. And like, there are some supply chain issues that are still going to persist, throughout this year. Like Apple had their earnings recently, and they gave bad news in a very nice way. They said, "Oh, supply chain will continue to be an issue until 2023 at least, but it's a little bit lesser than December, which is like, oh, that's encouraging. We're at least going in the right direction, but it's going to be a long time to get to the end.
100%. Listen, I think we should wrap it up. I want to have you on again at some point to talk EVs because we just didn't, and we wanted to do that at some point. So maybe we should just do an episode on the state of EVs and you can join because I'd love to hear your perspective from someone who's trying to get into it.
Yeah.
Other than, me who's just like been doing it for a while. And, I have some pretty strong opinions, but yeah, do you want to let people know where they can find you on the internet, what your various social media handles are, and promote your YouTube channel, please?
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube at This Is Tech Today. That's the primary place to find polished content. But also you can find me on the normal social media websites like Instagram and Twitter at This Is Tech Today. It's This Is Tech Today everywhere, let's be honest. But I'm quite active on Twitter and Instagram and starting to get into the whole TikToks thing. So, go follow me there.
Ooh. I need to pay attention to that. I'm Tank Girl almost everywhere. TNKGRL, like the comic book character. Just drop the vowels and you get my handle on Instagram and my handle on Twitter. If you want to chat about this podcast with both Brandon and I, hit us up on Twitter. And of course, you want to see pretty pictures of phones, pretty pictures taken with phones, pretty pictures of cars taken with phones. You see where this is going? Check out my Instagram as well. And then the podcast lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. We're on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify. Everywhere good podcasts can be found. There's also an RSS feed at that URL you can subscribe to. And so subscribe, tell your friends. If you use an app that lets you rate or review the podcast, please consider doing that. It helps people discover the show. And then, of course, we have a couple of YouTube channels, youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast and youtube.com/mobiletechmore. You know how YouTube works. Subscribe, like the videos, comment in the videos. You can comment about the podcast in the videos. I don't mind if it's a little off topic, so go ahead. The main channel is mostly unboxing videos of the phones I get as I get them, generally just after the embargo lifts or something. I just like to show you visuals so that when I talk about something on the podcast, you're like, oh yeah, I saw Miriam handle this phone. I know what it looks like now. And then sometimes I do hands-ons and reviews, but it's more rare. Mobile Tech More is kind of a new channel, and it's really about all the peripheral stuff around phones, like things like car tech, travel tech, home automation tech. I tend to lump the audio into the main channel because I feel like audio is a pretty essential part of the phone experience anyway. So check out those channels. You know what to do about YouTube. You know how it works. So yeah, Patreon is another place where you can find me. There is patreon.com/tankgirl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. And, this podcast can always use your help. So consider helping. We've got a bunch of tiers. One is for a Discord channel. One is for video version. You're going to see Brandon's face on video and me on this podcast, and you're going to get it before everyone else. So I publish the video version kind of more raw, less edited. I don't go crazy with like the audio and the video quality too much. And I get it to you a day or two before the audio version. And sometimes you get extra content because we have to cut stuff out. So consider joining Patreon to get all these perks and check them out. And I'd appreciate it. Also, if you don't want to use Patreon, I get it. There is a PayPal link in the show notes. You can click through that and buy me a coffee. That'd be awesome. I'd appreciate it. And finally, I want to thank our sponsor, MediaTek. MediaTek is the #1 Wi-Fi supplier across broadband, retail routers, consumer electronic devices, and gaming, and is one of the first adopters of Wi-Fi 7. And MediaTek's Wi-Fi 7 technology can fulfill the current need for all the application consumers enjoy today. MediaTek has also been investing heavily in 6G research and development to ensure high-quality technical development that will lead to its successful rollout in the coming years, with MediaTek's vision that 6G will enable intelligent connectivity with ubiquitous and transformational user experiences globally. And of course, I want to thank Brandon for being on the show this week. Thanks so much, Brandon, for being my guest. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Absolutely. We'll have you on at some point in the future to talk about those EVs.
Yeah.
And folks, we'll have another show next week, so stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.